When Sophia Martinez received that mysterious phone call at 2 a.m., she never imagined it would change her life forever. The voice on the other end offered her more money than she'd ever seen, but the price would be higher than she could ever imagine. What started as a desperate attempt to save her dying mother would lead to a pregnancy that defied all odds and a revelation that would shake the very foundations of New York's most powerful empire. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights in the hospital corridor buzzed incessantly as Sophia Martinez clutched the discharge papers with trembling hands. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, 6 months to live, maybe less. The words echoed in her mind as she watched. Her mother, Elena, struggled to walk down the sterile hallway, her once vibrant frame now frail and hollow. "Mija, don't look at me like that," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible above the hospital's ambient noise. "I've lived a good life." Sophia forced a smile, but inside, her world was crumbling. The experimental treatment Dr. Harrison had mentioned could extend her mother's life by years, possibly even save her. But at $400,000, it might as well have been $4 million. Sophia's job at the downtown diner barely covered their rent, and her mother's insurance had already maxed out. That night, in their cramped studio apartment in Queens, Sophia sat at her laptop scrolling through job listings, loan applications, and desperate Google searches for miracle fundraising ideas. Her savings account showed $847.23, the result of 3 years of working double shifts and skipping meals. Her mother slept fitfully on the pull-out couch, occasionally groaning from pain even through the medication. The phone rang at exactly 2:17 a.m. The caller ID showed only private number. "Hello?" Sophia answered, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Miss Martinez, this is Victoria Chen, Executive Assistant to Mr. Alexander Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood would like to meet with you tomorrow regarding a business proposition that could solve your current financial difficulties." Sophia's blood ran cold. How did this stranger know about her situation? "I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong person. I don't know any Mr. Blackwood." Sophia Elena Martinez, age 26, currently employed at Murphy's Diner on 42nd Street. Your mother, Elena Martinez, was recently diagnosed at Mount Sinai Hospital. You've been researching experimental cancer treatments, specifically Dr. Harrison's protocol. The phone nearly slipped from Sophia's sweaty palm. "How do you know all this? Who are you people?" "Mr. Blackwood will explain everything tomorrow. The Blackwood Tower, 47th Street, penthouse level, 2 o'clock sharp. This conversation could change both your life and your mother's." "Good evening, Miss Martinez." The line went dead, leaving Sophia staring at her phone in the darkness. She'd heard of Alexander Blackwood, everyone in New York had. The reclusive billionaire who'd inherited Blackwood Industries at 25 and turned it into one of the most powerful conglomerates in the world. But why would someone like that know about a struggling waitress from Queens? Sleep didn't come that night. Sophia spent hours researching Alexander Blackwood online, finding little beyond business articles and the occasional blurry paparazzi photo. The man was an enigma, brilliant, ruthless, and according to rumors, completely isolated from the world. Some articles mentioned a mysterious illness that kept him from public appearances, but details were scarce. The next afternoon, Sophia stood before the gleaming Blackwood Tower, feeling impossibly small in her only decent dress, a black number she'd worn to job interviews and her father's funeral 3 years earlier. The building stretched impossibly high into the Manhattan sky, its glass facade reflecting the bustling city below. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt eternal. When the doors finally opened, Sophia stepped into a world she'd only seen in movies. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Central Park, while modern art adorned walls of pristine white marble. The space was beautiful but cold, like a museum where no one actually lived. "Miss Martinez." The voice came from behind her. Sophia turned to see a petite Asian woman in an impeccably tailored suit, approaching with measured steps. "I'm Victoria. Chen, thank you for coming." "I almost didn't," Sophia admitted. "This whole situation is strange." Victoria's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Blackwood will see you now. Please follow me, and remember, he has a condition that makes him quite sensitive to light and sound. Keep your voice low and avoid sudden movements." They walked through a series of increasingly dim corridors until they reached a set of heavy wooden doors. Victoria knocked twice, then pushed them open to reveal what looked like a high-tech cave. Heavy curtains blocked all natural light, and the room was illuminated only by the soft glow of multiple computer monitors and medical equipment that hummed quietly in the background. In the center of this technological cocoon sat a man who couldn't have been much older than Sophia herself, though it was hard to tell in the dim lighting. Alexander Blackwood was tall and lean, with sharp features that might have been handsome if not for the obvious signs of illness. Pale skin that seemed almost translucent, dark circles under his eyes, and a slight tremor in his hands as he gestured for her to sit. "Miss Martinez." His voice was surprisingly strong despite his appearance. "Thank you for coming. I imagine you have questions." "A few thousand," Sophia replied, settling into the chair across from his desk. "Starting with how you know about my mother and why you wanted to see me." Alexander leaned back in his chair, studying her with intense green eyes. "I know about your mother because I make it my business to know things. As for why you're here, I have a proposition that could save her life." "What kind of proposition?" "I'm dying, Miss Martinez. I have a rare genetic condition called Hartwell's syndrome. It's degenerative, incurable, and extremely painful. I've consulted with specialists around the world, spent millions on experimental treatments, and nothing has worked." He paused, his fingers drumming against the desk. "Until now." Sophia waited, her heart pounding. "Recent research has discovered that certain genetic markers, when combined in very specific ways, can halt the progression of Hartwell's syndrome. The treatment requires intimate contact with someone who carries these particular markers. It's not a cure, but it could extend my life significantly." "What does this have to do with me?" Alexander's smile was thin and humorless. "You carry those markers, Miss Martinez. You're one of only 3 people in North America with the exact genetic combination I need." The room seemed to spin around Sophia. "How could you possibly know that? I've been searching for someone like you for 2 years. My people have been discreetly testing genetic databases, hospital records, blood donations, all perfectly legal. I assure you, when your mother was diagnosed and blood work was done, certain flags were raised. You've been spying on us." "I've been trying to save my own life," Alexander replied bluntly, "just as you're trying to save your mother's. Which brings me to my proposal." Sophia's mouth felt dry. "I'm listening." "I will pay for your mother's treatment, all of it. The experimental protocol, the best doctors, a private room, whatever she needs. In exchange, you'll stay here for 6 months and allow me to utilize your genetic compatibility." "Utilize how, exactly?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "The treatment requires regular physical contact, skin-to-skin contact specifically. The research isn't entirely clear on the mechanism, but the theory is that certain proteins in your blood and tissue can be absorbed through prolonged contact." Sophia felt sick. "You want me to be your what? Your human medicine. I want you to help me live, and I want to help your mother live. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement, and if I say no, then you walk out that door and we never speak again. Your mother gets the standard treatment, and I die within the year." His green eyes never left hers. "But if you say yes, she gets the best care money can buy, and I get a chance at a normal life." Sophia's mind raced. The logical part of her brain screamed that this was insane, that she should run as far away from this man and his twisted proposal as possible. But the desperate daughter in her, the one who'd watched her mother waste away for months, whispered that this might be their only chance. "How do I know you'll keep your word about my mother's treatment?" Alexander pressed a button on his desk, and Victoria Chen appeared immediately. "Victoria, please bring Miss Martinez the contract we discussed." Victoria returned moments later, with a thick document. Alexander slid it across the desk. "This is a legally binding agreement. Your mother's treatment begins immediately upon your acceptance. The funds will be held in escrow by my lawyers. Even if something happens to me, the money is guaranteed." Sophia flipped through the pages, her hands shaking. The numbers were staggering, not just the 400,000 for the experimental treatment, but provisions for ongoing care, medications, and even a trust fund that would ensure her mother's comfort for the rest of her life. "There's one more thing," Alexander said quietly. "The research suggests that the treatment's effectiveness increases with emotional compatibility. It works best when both parties have a genuine connection. You're asking me to pretend to care about you. I'm asking you to try, for both our sakes." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sophia looked around the sterile, lonely penthouse, then back at the man who seemed more like a ghost than a living person. 6 months of her life in exchange for her mother's survival. 6 months of pretending to care for a stranger who'd made her mother's illness into a business transaction. But as she thought of Elena's weak smile that morning, of the pain medication that barely helped anymore, of the time they were running out of, the choice became clear. I need to see her first. I need to tell her I'm taking a job that requires travel, that I'll be gone for a while, but that everything will be okay. Alexander nodded. "Victoria will drive you. The treatment preparations can begin as early as tomorrow." Sophia signed her name at the bottom of the contract, each letter feeling like a chain being forged around her future. As she handed the document back to Alexander, their fingers brushed for just a moment. His skin was cold, almost lifeless, and she wondered what she'd just committed herself to. "Welcome to Blackwood Tower, Miss Martinez," Alexander said, his voice carrying a note of something that might have been a relief. "Your mother's treatment begins tonight." As Victoria escorted her back to the elevator, Sophia caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished marble walls. She looked like a stranger to herself, a woman who'd just sold 6 months of her life to save another's. The elevator doors closed, and she began her descent back to the world below, knowing that when she returned tomorrow, everything about her life would change forever. The city lights blurred past the elevator's glass walls, and Sophia realized she was crying. Whether from relief, fear, or something else entirely, she couldn't tell. All she knew was that her mother would live, and that somehow she'd find a way to survive whatever came next, in the cold, lonely tower that would become her prison. The penthouse that would become Sophia's home for the next 6 months felt like stepping into another dimension. Victoria led her through a series of rooms that seemed designed more for function than comfort. A sterile bedroom with hospital-grade air filtration, a bathroom equipped with UV sanitizing lights, and a small kitchenette stocked with organic foods and medical supplements. "Mr. Blackwood's condition requires a controlled environment," Victoria explained, adjusting the temperature settings on a digital panel. "The air is constantly filtered, the lighting can be dimmed or brightened based on his tolerance levels, and all surfaces are treated with antimicrobial coatings." Sophia set down her single suitcase and looked around the space that would confine her. Through the tinted windows, she could see the city sprawling below, but it felt like viewing another world through a television screen. When does the treatment start? Dr. Reeves will be here within the hour to explain the medical protocol. Mr. Blackwood is currently undergoing his daily therapeutic regimen, but he'll join you for dinner at 7. After Victoria left, Sophia called her mother from the secure phone line Alexander had provided. Elena sounded stronger already. The new medical team had started aggressive pain management, and for the first time in months, her mother wasn't groaning with every breath. "The doctors here are amazing, Mija." Elena's voice carried genuine hope. "They're talking about starting the experimental treatment tomorrow. I don't understand how you managed to get insurance to cover this, but thank God you did." Sophia closed her eyes, the lie sitting heavy in her chest. I found a way, Mama. Focus on getting better." Dr. Reeves arrives precisely at 6. A stern woman in her 50s with greying hair and the no-nonsense demeanour of someone who'd spent decades dealing with unusual medical cases. She carried a briefcase full of monitoring equipment and consent. Forms. "Miss Martinez, I need to be completely transparent about what you're agreeing to," Dr. Reeves began, setting up what looked like a portable ECG machine. "Hartwell's syndrome is devastating, but the preliminary research on genetic compatibility therapy is promising. However, we're essentially using you as a human treatment delivery system." "What exactly does that mean?" "Your blood contains specific proteins that seem to slow the neurological degeneration Alexander experiences. The most effective delivery method appears to be prolonged skin contact, at least 4 hours daily of direct physical contact." Sophia's stomach churned. 4 hours? The research indicates that emotional stress reduces the treatment's effectiveness, so we'll start gradually. 1 hour today, 2 tomorrow, building up over the first week. Your vitals will be monitored constantly to ensure your own health isn't compromised. Dr. Reeves attached sensors to Sophia's arms and chest, then drew several vials of blood. "We'll be tracking your protein levels, hormone fluctuations, and any signs that the treatment is affecting your own physiology. This is uncharted territory, Miss Martinez. You're the first person to undergo this protocol." The weight of being a human experiment settled over Sophia like a shroud. "What are the risks to me?" "Honestly, we don't know. In theory, you're simply sharing beneficial proteins that your body produces naturally. But prolonged exposure to someone with Hartwell's syndrome could potentially—" Dr. Reeves paused, clearly uncomfortable. "Could potentially what?" "There have been isolated cases of genetic conditions affecting close contacts through unknown mechanisms. It's rare, but we'll be monitoring for any signs of neurological changes in you as well." At exactly 7 o'clock, Alexander appeared in the doorway. He moved differently than he had that afternoon, less tremor in his hands, better color in his face. He'd changed from his business attire into simple black pants and a grey sweater that made him look younger, more human. "How are you settling in?" he asked, his voice softer than before. "It's a lot to process," Sophia admitted. They sat at a small dining table that had been set with 2 place settings. The meal was elaborate: seared salmon, roasted vegetables, and a wine that probably cost more than Sophia's monthly rent. "Tell me about yourself," Alexander said, cutting into his fish with precise movements. "I know the facts from your file, but I'd like to know who you actually are." Sophia looked at him suspiciously. "Why?" "Because if we're going to spend the next 6 months in close proximity, we should probably know each other beyond genetic compatibility." Despite everything, Sophia found herself talking about growing up in Queens with parents who'd immigrated from Mexico with nothing but determination, about her father's death in a construction accident when she was 23, leaving her to care for her mother alone, about her abandoned dreams of becoming a teacher when the financial reality of their situation hit. Alexander listened without interrupting, occasionally asking questions that suggested he was genuinely interested, rather than just making polite conversation. When she finished, she realized she'd eaten most of her meal without noticing. "Your turn," she said. "Tell me who Alexander Blackwood actually is." His smile was rueful. "That's more complicated. I became CEO of Blackwood Industries. When my father died 5 years ago, I was completely unprepared. I'd studied computer science, not business, but the company was failing, and I had to learn quickly or watch everything my family had built collapse." "What about before the illness?" Alexander's expression darkened. "I wasn't always like this. 3 years ago, I was different. I traveled, went to parties, had friends. Then the symptoms started: sensitivity to light, chronic pain, muscle weakness. By the time doctors identified Hartwell's syndrome, I'd already become a recluse." "Do you miss it, your old life?" "Every day." He met her eyes across the table. "That's why I need this to work, Sophia. I don't want to just survive. I want to live again." After dinner, Dr. Reeves returned with more monitoring equipment. The treatment room was adjacent to Alexander's bedroom, furnished with a hospital bed surrounded by medical devices and computers tracking various biological functions. "We'll start with 1 hour of contact," Dr. Reeves explained, attaching wireless sensors to both Sophia and Alexander. "Simple hand-holding while you both remain clothed. The important thing is direct skin-to-skin contact." Sophia settled into a chair beside the bed, while Alexander lay back against the pillows. When he extended his hand toward her, she hesitated for a moment before placing her palm against his. His skin was cold, but not unpleasantly so, and she could feel his pulse through his wrist, faster than normal but strong. "Just try to relax," Dr. Reeves said, monitoring the readouts on her tablet. "Think of this as meditation time." The first few minutes were awkward. Sophia kept glancing at the monitors, watching the green lines that represented their various vital signs. Alexander's breathing gradually slowed, and some of the tension left his face. His hand warmed under hers. "This is strange," Sophia said quietly. "Which part? Medical experimentation or holding hands with a stranger?" Despite everything, Sophia almost smiled. Both. 20 minutes in, something shifted. Alexander's grip on her hand tightened slightly, and his breathing deepened. The monitors showed changes in his neurological activity, patterns that Dr. Reeves observed with growing excitement. "This is remarkable," the doctor murmured. "His protein absorption rate is higher than we projected." Sophia felt a strange tingling sensation where their skin touched, not unpleasant but definitely noticeable. "Is that normal?" "We don't know what normal is yet," Dr. Reeves replied honestly. "How do you feel?" "Different, like there's some kind of energy transfer happening." The hour passed more quickly than expected. When Dr. Reeves finally instructed them to separate, Sophia felt an odd sense of loss, as if something important had been disconnected. Alexander's improvement was visible: better color, steadier hands, brighter eyes. "The initial results are very encouraging," Dr. Reeves said, reviewing the data. "We'll increase the contact time tomorrow, and I'd like to try some variation in positioning to maximize the protein transfer." After the doctor left, Sophia found herself alone with Alexander in the dim treatment room. He was still lying on the bed, looking more alive than he had all day. "Thank you," he said simply. "Don't thank me yet. This was just the beginning. Still, I haven't felt this clear in months. It's like someone turned up the brightness on the world." Sophia studied his face in the soft light from the monitors. "What happens if this works? After 6 months? I mean, do you just go back to your normal life and forget about the woman who helped save you?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. I haven't thought beyond surviving." "Maybe you should start." That night, alone in her sterile bedroom, Sophia called her mother again. Elena was scheduled for her first round of experimental treatment the next morning, and her voice carried an energy that had been missing for months. "I keep thinking this is all a dream," Elena said. Yesterday I was dying, and today I have hope again. You're an angel, Mija. I don't know how you made this happen, but you saved my life. After hanging up, Sophia stood at her window looking out over Manhattan. Somewhere down there, her mother was sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, surrounded by the best medical care money could buy. Up here, Sophia was trapped in a tower with a dying man whose touch somehow made her feel more alive than she had in years. The strangest part was that Alexander Blackwood wasn't what she'd expected. Behind the wealth and power and mysterious illness was someone who seemed as lonely and lost as she was. The way he'd listened to her stories, the genuine interest in his questions, the vulnerability in his eyes when he talked about his old life, none of it fit with her preconceptions of ruthless billionaires. Dr. Reeves had warned her that emotional connection would make the treatment more effective, but she hadn't expected to actually like the man she was supposed to cure. That complication could make the next 6 months either much easier or much more dangerous than she'd anticipated. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Sophia's last thought was of Alexander's hand warming under hers, and the strange sense that something profound had begun between them. Something that went beyond medical necessity and into territory she wasn't prepared to explore. Part 3. 3 weeks into the treatment, Sophia's life had settled into an unusual rhythm. Mornings began with blood tests and vitals checks from Dr. Reeves, followed by a light breakfast with Alexander in the sunroom, the only space in the penthouse that received natural light, though the windows were specially tinted to filter out the wavelengths that triggered his symptoms. The treatment sessions had evolved beyond simple hand-holding. Dr. Reeves had determined that maximum protein absorption occurred when larger areas of skin were in contact, leading to increasingly intimate arrangements. They now spent their daily 4 hours with Sophia lying beside Alexander on the medical bed, her arm across his chest, their legs intertwined, while monitors tracked the complex biochemical exchange happening between their bodies. What disturbed Sophia most wasn't the physical intimacy, it was how natural it had begun to feel. Alexander's presence had become comforting rather than threatening, and she found herself looking forward to their conversations during treatment sessions. He was brilliant, well-read, and surprisingly funny when he allowed his guard to drop. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Alexander said during one afternoon session, his fingers absently tracing patterns on her arm. "That's dangerous territory," Sophia replied, though she didn't move away from his touch. "We're way past dangerous territory. I think we crossed that line when you agreed to be my human medicine." Sophia considered for a moment. "I used to write poetry before my father died, before everything fell apart. I had notebooks full of it, dreams of maybe publishing someday. What happened to the notebooks? Sold them with most of our other belongings when Mum got sick. We needed every dollar." She paused. "Your turn. Tell me something real." Alexander was quiet for so long that Sophia thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I used to paint. Landscapes, mostly. I was actually pretty good. Had a showing at a small gallery when I was 24. Sold 3 pieces. What happened to that? Hartwell's syndrome affects fine motor control. My hands shake too much now." He lifted his free hand, and Sophia could see the subtle tremor that never quite went away. "I destroyed all my paintings. When I realized I'd never be able to create again." Sophia turned to look at him directly. "That was stupid." Alexander blinked, clearly taken aback. "Excuse me? Destroying your work because you can't make more. That's like burning down a library because they stopped printing books." She sat up slightly, her movement causing the monitors to beep as their contact shifted. "You had something beautiful that you created, and you destroyed it out of self-pity." "Self-pity?" Alexander's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Yes. You were so focused on what you'd lost that you couldn't see what you still had. Sophia settled, back against him, her voice gentling. I'm sorry, that came out harsher than I meant it. No, you're right. Alexander's admission surprised them both. I was angry and scared, and I took it out on the only things that proved I was more than just a sick man. Their conversations during treatment sessions became a highlight of both their days. Alexander talked about the crushing responsibility of running Blackwood Industries while battling his illness, the isolation that came with being unable to maintain normal relationships, and the fear that he would die without ever truly living. Sophia shared her dreams of teaching, her guilt over leaving her mother's care to strangers, and her growing uncertainty about what would happen when their 6 months ended. The physical improvements in Alexander were remarkable. His tremors had decreased significantly, he could tolerate brighter lights, and his stamina had improved enough that he'd begun taking short walks around the penthouse. Dr. Reeves was documenting everything for what she called revolutionary research that could change how we approach genetic therapies, but it was the emotional changes that caught Sophia off guard. Alexander laughed more easily now, smiled without seeming to think about it first, and had begun asking her opinion on business decisions. He'd installed a small library in her room filled with books of poetry and teaching methodology, claiming they were research materials for understanding his treatment provider. The first major complication arose on a Thursday evening in their 4th week. Sophia was reading in her room when Victoria Chen knocked on her door, looking more flustered than Sophia had ever seen the usually composed woman. Miss Martinez, we have a situation. Marcus Blackwood is here demanding to see his nephew. Sophia had heard Alexander mention his uncle in passing. Marcus was Alexander's father's younger brother who'd been passed over for company leadership when Alexander inherited everything. What kind of situation? He's brought lawyers and is claiming that Alexander's illness makes him mentally incompetent to run the company. He wants a competency hearing. The confrontation was happening in Alexander's office when Sophia arrived. Marcus Blackwood was a larger, older version of Alexander, with the same sharp features but cold blue eyes and an aggressive demeanor that filled the room with tension. Hiding up here, playing with your little nurse while the company falls. Apart, Marcus was saying to Alexander, who sat behind his desk looking pale but determined. The board is losing confidence, Alexander. Stock prices are down 12% this quarter. The company is fine, Marcus. Q3 reports show we're actually ahead of projections because I've been managing half your responsibilities. Marcus shot back. You can barely function for 4 hours a day, and when you do appear, you look like a walking corpse. Sophia felt Alexander tense beside her. His improvement was obvious to anyone who'd seen him a month ago, but to someone expecting the vigorous young man Alexander had been before his illness, he probably did still appear frail. I'm getting better, Alexander said quietly. Marcus laughed harshly. Better? You're delusional. Whatever quack treatment you're trying isn't working. It's time to face reality. You need to step down and let someone healthy run this company. The treatment is working, Sophia said, stepping forward. Alexander's improvement over the past month has been remarkable. Marcus looked at her for the first time, his expression shifting from dismissive to calculating. And you are? Sophia Martinez. I'm Alexander's medical care coordinator. Medical care coordinator, Marcus repeated slowly. How interesting. Tell me, Miss Martinez, what exactly does your coordination involve? Because from where I stand, it looks like my nephew is paying you to play house with him while he wastes away. Alexander stood abruptly. That's enough, Marcus. Is it? Because I think the board would be very interested to know that you're spending company money on some kind of alternative therapy involving a young woman living in your penthouse. Marcus's smile was cruel. How do you think that will look in the newspapers? The threat hung in the air like poison. Sophia realized that Marcus wasn't just challenging Alexander's competency, he was preparing to destroy his reputation as well. "Get out," Alexander said, his voice deadly quiet. "I'll be back with the competency paperwork next week," Marcus replied, gathering his papers. "Enjoy your little fantasy while it lasts, nephew. Reality is coming." After Marcus left, Alexander sank back into his chair, looking older than his years. The stress of the confrontation had triggered some of his symptoms. His hands were shaking again, and the color had drained from his face. "This is my fault," Sophia said. "If people find out about our arrangement, it'll destroy your reputation." "My reputation is the least of my worries right now. If Marcus succeeds in having me declared incompetent, he'll take over the company and cancel your mother's treatment." The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on Alexander's recovery that she'd forgotten how precarious their situation really was. Everything, her mother's life, Alexander's health, their strange partnership, depended on maintaining a balance that Marcus was determined to destroy. "What do we do?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city lights. When he spoke, his voice carried a resolve that Sophia hadn't heard before. "We prove that I'm not just competent. We prove that I'm stronger than I've ever been, and we do it in a way that makes Marcus wish he'd never challenged me." That night, Alexander called an emergency board meeting for the following week. He planned to present not just the quarterly reports, but a comprehensive 5-year expansion plan that would demonstrate his complete mental acuity and business vision. "I need to be at my absolute best," he told Sophia, as they prepared for their evening treatment session. "Can you handle extending our sessions? More contact time might accelerate the improvement." Sophia agreed, though she wasn't sure if her motivation was purely medical. The thought of losing Alexander, to his illness, to his uncle's machinations, or to the end of their 6-month agreement, had become more frightening than she wanted to admit. As they settled into their extended treatment position, Sophia realized that somewhere in the past month, Alexander had stopped being just a patient she was helping. He'd become someone she genuinely cared about, someone whose success mattered. To her, beyond their financial arrangement, the monitors hummed softly around them as their bodies found their familiar alignment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats to everything they'd built together. But for now, in the quiet intimacy of their shared healing, Sophia allowed herself to hope that whatever came next, they would face it together. The emergency. Board meeting was scheduled for Friday at 2 o'clock, giving Alexander exactly 6 days to prepare his defense. What should have been a routine presentation had transformed into a battle for control of his family's empire, with Sophia caught in the crossfire. Alexander threw himself into preparation with an intensity that worried Dr. Reeves. He worked 18-hour days, analyzed market trends, consulted with division heads, and crafted a business proposal so comprehensive it could have served as a master's thesis. The stress was taking its toll. His symptoms had worsened despite the continued treatments, and dark circles had returned under his eyes. "You're pushing too hard," Sophia told him Wednesday evening as they settled into their treatment session. His body was rigid with tension, making the protein absorption less efficient. "I don't have a choice. Marcus has been poisoning the board members against me for months, probably longer. I need to present something so brilliant that they can't possibly question my competency. What about just being honest? Tell them about the treatment. Show them your improvement." Alexander's laugh was bitter. "Right. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet my human medicine, Sophia Martinez. We cuddle for 4 hours a day so I can absorb her proteins. That'll go over well." Sophia flinched at his crude description of their relationship, though she understood his frustration. There has to be another way. There is. I win this meeting, prove I'm the leader they need, and make Marcus look like the opportunistic vulture he is. Thursday brought an unexpected complication. Dr. Reeves arrived for Sophia's morning examination looking troubled, carrying additional testing equipment that hadn't been part of their routine. "Is everything all right?" Sophia asked as the doctor drew what seemed like an unusual amount of blood. "I'm not sure. Your hormone levels have been fluctuating in ways I don't entirely understand. It could be stress-related, or it could be a side effect of the prolonged treatment exposure." Dr. Reeves paused, studying her tablet. "When was your last menstrual cycle?" Sophia had to think. Between the stress of moving into the penthouse, her mother's treatment, and the intensity of caring for Alexander, she'd lost track of such details. It's been a while. Maybe 7 weeks." 7 weeks? Dr. Reeves looked sharply at her. "Sophia, I need to ask you directly. Have you and Alexander been intimate beyond the prescribed treatment contact?" "What? No." Sophia's face burned. "We've never... The treatment is exactly what you've observed. I'm going to run some additional tests. The protein exchange we've been monitoring is more complex than we initially understood. There may be hormonal cascades we haven't accounted for." That afternoon's treatment session was awkward. Alexander noticed Sophia's distraction immediately, and when she finally explained Dr. Reeves's concerns, his reaction was explosive. "She thinks you might be pregnant?" Alexander sat up abruptly, disrupting their contact. "That's impossible. We've never..." "I know that. You know that. But my body might not know that." Sophia pulled away from him entirely, suddenly uncomfortable with their physical closeness. "Dr. Reeves said the protein exchange is more complicated than anyone realized." Alexander ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that had become familiar. "Over their weeks together, this is all my fault. I never should have put you in this situation." "Stop! You didn't force me into anything. I made a choice to save my mother's life, a choice that might have consequences neither of us anticipated." The test results came back Friday morning, 2 hours before the board meeting. Dr. Reeves delivered the news with clinical detachment that couldn't mask her own bewilderment. "You're pregnant, Sophia, approximately 6 weeks along." The words hit like a physical blow. Sophia sat down heavily, her mind struggling to process the impossible. "How? We never..." The hormone cascades, triggered by the protein exchange, appear to have created a kind of biochemical fertilization. I've never seen anything like it. Your body has essentially created a pregnancy from the genetic material it's been absorbing. From Alexander. Alexander, who had been pacing behind them, stopped dead. "Are you saying she's pregnant with my child without us ever having sex?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. The treatment has triggered a reproductive response that mimics natural conception. The fetus appears to be developing normally, though I'll need to monitor closely for any genetic anomalies related to the unusual conception method." Sophia felt the world tilting around her. "Is the baby healthy?" "Preliminary scans suggest normal development. However, there's something else." Dr. Reeves hesitated. "The ultrasound shows 3 distinct heartbeats. You're carrying triplets." The silence that followed was deafening. Alexander had gone pale, his hand gripping the back of a chair for support. Sophia stared at the ultrasound images, seeing 3 tiny forms that had somehow been created from her bizarre medical arrangement. "I have to go," Alexander said suddenly. "The board meeting..." "Alexander, we need to talk about this," Sophia called after him, but he was already leaving. "Let him process," Dr. Reeves said gently. "This is unprecedented for all of us." Alone in her room, Sophia called her mother. Elena's voice was stronger than it had been in months. The experimental treatment was working beyond all expectations, and doctors were cautiously optimistic about her long-term prognosis. "You sound upset, Mija. What's wrong?" Sophia couldn't bring herself to explain the impossible situation. "Just stress from work. How are you feeling? Like I might actually see my grandchildren someday, Elena said, and Sophia nearly broke down, crying at the unintended irony. The board meeting began at exactly 2 o'clock in the Blackwood Industries conference room on the 42nd floor. Sophia watched through the building's internal security feed that Victoria had given her access to, seeing Alexander enter the room looking composed despite everything that had happened that morning. 12 board members sat around the polished conference table, with Marcus Blackwood positioned directly across from Alexander's chair. Marcus had clearly been busy. Several board members who had previously been neutral looked skeptical as Alexander began his presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for accommodating this emergency meeting. I understand there have been concerns about my fitness to lead this company, so I'm here to address those concerns directly. Alexander's presentation was masterful. He outlined a 5-year expansion plan that would take Blackwood Industries into emerging markets, detailed cost-saving measures that could improve margins by 15%, and presented partnership opportunities that would strengthen their position against competitors. His voice was strong, his analysis was brilliant, and his vision was compelling. But Marcus was ready with his counterattack. Very impressive, Alexander. Your analysis is thorough, your projections are optimistic, and your presentation skills remain adequate. Marcus's tone was patronizing. However, I have to question whether a man who can barely maintain normal office hours is capable of implementing such an ambitious plan. My health is improving daily. I'm more focused and energetic than I've been in years. Thanks to your live-in medical coordinator. Marcus's smile was predatory. Tell me, nephew, what exactly is the nature of your relationship with Miss Martinez? The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Alexander's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. Miss Martinez is providing specialized medical care under the supervision of Dr. Rachel Reeves, one of the country's leading experts in genetic therapy. Genetic therapy that requires her to live in your penthouse? That's quite an unusual medical arrangement. Unusual situations require unusual solutions. Marcus opened a folder and slid several photographs across the table, surveillance images of Sophia entering and leaving the building, medical supply deliveries, and what appeared to be long-distance shots taken through the penthouse windows. I've had my nephew under observation for the past month, Marcus announced. What I've discovered raises serious questions about his judgment and mental state. He's been conducting unauthorized medical experiments involving unregistered treatments and living in inappropriate proximity to his so-called medical coordinator. Board member Jennifer Walsh leaned forward. Alexander, is it true that this woman is living in your penthouse? It's true that the treatment requires close monitoring and frequent contact. Miss Martinez has made significant sacrifices to help with my recovery. What kind of contact? Marcus pressed. Alexander's composure finally cracked slightly. That's a private medical matter. Not when it affects your capacity to lead this company. Not when it raises questions about your judgment and mental stability. The room erupted in whispered conversations. Several board members looked uncomfortable, while others appeared convinced by Marcus's implications. Alexander stood at the head of the table, his brilliant presentation forgotten in the face of personal attacks he couldn't adequately defend without revealing the truth about his relationship with Sophia. I move for a vote of no confidence, Marcus announced. Alexander Blackwood has demonstrated poor judgment, questionable medical decisions, and an inappropriate relationship that compromises his ability to lead. I propose that the board remove him as CEO and install interim leadership until a permanent replacement can be found. The motion was seconded immediately by 2 board members who had clearly been recruited by Marcus in advance. As the formal vote was called, Alexander realized that his uncle's strategy had been perfect. Attack not just his competence, but his character. in a way that made the truth sound even worse than the lies. When the votes were tallied, the result was devastating: 8 in favor of removal, 4 opposed. Alexander Blackwood was no longer CEO of the company his family had built. As the board members filed out, avoiding eye contact with the man they'd just deposed, Marcus approached his nephew with mock sympathy. "I'm sorry it came to this, Alexander. But you brought this on yourself with your erratic behavior and poor judgment. Clean out your office by Monday." Alexander returned to the penthouse 3 hours later, looking like a man who'd lost everything. Sophia was waiting for him, having watched the entire proceedings and knowing the outcome before he walked through the door. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "It's not your fault. Marcus was always going to find a way to destroy me. You just gave him the ammunition." The words stung, but Sophia understood his pain. "What happens now?" Alexander poured himself a drink, the first alcohol she'd seen him consume since arriving. "Now Marcus gets everything he wanted. The company, the power, the victory over the nephew who stole his birthright. What about my mother's treatment? That was tied to my personal accounts, not company funds. It's safe." Alexander drained his glass. "And what about you, Sophia? What happens to the woman carrying my impossible children?" The question had been haunting her since Dr. Reeves delivered the news. 3 babies, conceived through medical science fiction, carried by a woman who'd agreed to 6 months of human experimentation to save her mother's life. "I don't know," she admitted. "I never planned for any of this." Alexander set down his glass and looked at her directly for the first time since learning about the pregnancy. "Neither did I, but it's happening anyway." Outside the penthouse windows, New York City continued its relentless pace, indifferent to the lives being transformed 47 floors above the street. Inside, 2 people who had started as strangers, bound by desperate necessity, faced an uncertain future, complicated by corporate betrayal, medical miracles, and 3 unborn children who would change everything. The weekend following Alexander's corporate downfall passed in tense silence. He disappeared into his home office, emerging only for meals and their required treatment sessions, which had become mechanical and cold. The easy intimacy they'd developed over the past month evaporated, replaced by the awkward formality of 2 people trapped in an impossible situation. Sophia spent Saturday researching her condition online, finding nothing that explained how genetic therapy could trigger spontaneous pregnancy. The medical literature contained no cases remotely similar to hers, leaving her feeling like a freak of science rather than a person carrying 3 human lives. Dr. Reeves arrived Monday morning with a team of specialists, a high-risk pregnancy expert, a geneticist, and a reproductive endocrinologist. They transformed the penthouse's medical room into a miniature obstetrics unit, complete with advanced ultrasound equipment and fetal monitoring systems. "Miss Martinez, I need to be completely transparent about your situation," Dr. Patricia Mills, the pregnancy specialist, explained after completing her examination. "You're carrying 3 fetuses that were conceived through an unprecedented biological process. We have no data on potential complications, genetic abnormalities, or long-term effects." "What are you saying exactly?" Sophia asked, dreading the answer. "I'm saying this pregnancy could be extremely high risk. The fetuses appear to be developing normally now, but we're in uncharted territory. I recommend termination before the end of the first trimester." The suggestion hit Sophia like a physical blow. "Terminate the pregnancy? It would be the safest option for your health. These children aren't conceived naturally. We don't know what genetic combinations might have occurred during the protein exchange process." Alexander, who had been silent throughout the examination, finally spoke. "What if she wants to continue the pregnancy?" Dr. Mills looked between them gravely. Then we monitor constantly, prepare for every possible complication, and hope for the best. But I have to warn you, if something goes wrong, we might not be able to save either the babies or Sophia. After the medical team left, Sophia and Alexander found themselves alone with the weight of an impossible decision. 3 lives hung in the balance, created through circumstances neither of them had anticipated or fully understood. "You should terminate," Alexander said quietly. "It's too dangerous." "That's not your decision to make, isn't it? They're carrying my genetic material. Don't I have some say?" Sophia turned on him with fury she didn't know she possessed. "Your genetic material? That's how you see this? 3 potential children reduced to your DNA sample? That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant. Ever since you found out about the pregnancy, you've treated me like a contaminated lab experiment. These babies might not have been conceived naturally, but they're still real." "They're still alive?" Alexander ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that had become more frequent as his stress increased. "Sophia, I've lost everything. My company, my reputation, my future. I can't ask you to risk your life for children that might not even survive. You're not asking me anything. I'm making my own choice." "What choice?" "You're pregnant with triplets conceived through experimental gene therapy. Your body is processing proteins it was never meant to handle long-term. Dr. Reeves doesn't even know if continuing the treatment will help or harm the babies." The treatment sessions had indeed become problematic. Sophia's changing hormone levels affected the protein absorption rate, and Alexander's improvement had plateaued. Some days, their contact seemed to help his symptoms. Other days, it appeared to make them worse. "Maybe we should stop the treatments," Sophia suggested. "If we stop, my condition will deteriorate rapidly. I might not survive to see whether you and the babies make it through the pregnancy. And if we continue, the babies might not survive." The genetic complications. They were trapped in a medical catch-22 that had no clear solution. Every choice carried devastating potential consequences, and the people they'd become over the past 6 weeks. Partners in healing, friends, something, approaching more than friends, were fracturing under the pressure. Tuesday brought an unexpected visitor. Victoria Chen announced that someone from the district attorney's office wanted to speak with Alexander about Marcus's accusations regarding unauthorized medical experimentation. The investigation that Marcus had threatened was becoming reality. Detective Sarah Rodriguez was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who clearly understood the gravity of what she was investigating. She interviewed Alexander for 3 hours, asking detailed questions about the treatment protocol, Sophia's consent procedures, and the medical oversight involved. "Mr. Blackwood, I need to understand something," Detective Rodriguez said, reviewing her notes. "You're claiming this is legitimate medical treatment, but Miss Martinez isn't a licensed medical professional, and Dr. Reeves isn't certified in the specific therapy you're describing. Because the therapy is experimental. We're pioneering a new treatment approach without FDA approval, without institutional review board oversight, without informed consent protocols." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Miss Martinez gave full informed consent to become pregnant with your children through genetic absorption, because that seems like a rather significant side effect that might not have been properly disclosed." When Detective Rodriguez interviewed Sophia, the questions became more pointed and personal. Had she been coerced? Was she being held against her will? Did she understand the risks when she agreed to the arrangement? "Nobody forced me into anything," Sophia insisted. "My mother was dying, Alexander needed help, and we found a way to help each other. A way that resulted in you becoming pregnant, with triplets, and him losing his company due to questionable judgment. The pregnancy was unexpected. Nobody planned for that. But you're choosing to continue it despite medical advice to terminate. Sophia hesitated. Yes. Why? The question hung in the air as Sophia struggled to articulate her reasons. Was it maternal instinct protecting children she'd never expected to conceive? Was it stubborn refusal to let Marcus's machinations claim even more victims? Or was it something deeper, a connection to Alexander that had grown beyond their original arrangement? Because they're my children, she finally said. However they were conceived, they're alive and they deserve a chance. After the detective left, Alexander and Sophia sat in their respective corners of the penthouse, the weight of official scrutiny adding another layer of complexity to their situation. The DA's investigation could result in criminal charges, medical, license revocations, and public exposure that would destroy whatever privacy they had left. We could run, Alexander suggested that evening. Leave the country, go somewhere the investigation can't reach us. Run where? With what money? You lost your company, remember? I have personal assets, offshore accounts Marcus doesn't know about. We could disappear, start over somewhere else. Sophia stared at him. You're talking about fleeing like criminals. What about my mother? What about Dr. Reeves? What about taking responsibility for what we've done? What we've done is try to save 2 lives. If that makes us criminals, then maybe the system is wrong. Or maybe we made choices without fully understanding the consequences, and now we have to face them. Their argument was interrupted by Dr. Reeves, who arrived for Sophia's evening examination, looking more excited than they'd seen her in weeks. I've been analyzing your latest blood work, she announced, and I think I understand what's happening with the pregnancy. Please tell me it's something good, Sophia said wearily. It might be better than good. The fetuses aren't just developing normally, they're developing optimally. Their genetic profiles show enhancements that could make them healthier, more intelligent and more resilient than naturally conceived children. Alexander leaned forward. What kind of enhancements? Improved immune systems, enhanced cognitive potential, increased resistance to genetic diseases. It's as if the protein exchange process selected and amplified the best genetic traits from both of you. So the children will be, what? Superhuman. Not superhuman, but potentially superior in multiple measurable ways. The treatment that's been healing Alexander has been simultaneously optimizing the genetic development of your children. The revelation changed everything. These weren't just accidental pregnancies resulting from medical experimentation. They were potentially the first enhanced humans created through genetic therapy. The implications were staggering, and the stakes had just increased exponentially. Does anyone else know about this? Alexander asked. Just us. But if this gets out, if the medical community learns what we've achieved, we'll never have peace again, Sophia finished. These children will become scientific curiosities, test subjects, property of whoever can claim them. Alexander stood and walked to the windows overlooking the city. Marcus wanted to destroy me, but he has no idea what he's actually stumbled onto. If he knew about the genetic enhancements, he'd do anything to control them. What are you thinking? Sophia asked, recognizing the calculating expression that had replaced his earlier despair. I'm thinking maybe it's time to stop running from this situation and start taking control of it. Marcus wants a war? Let's give him one he'll never forget. That night, as Sophia lay in bed feeling the first subtle movements of the 3 enhanced lives growing inside her, she realized that their story was far from over. The pregnancy that had seemed like a complication was actually the key to everything, not just their future, but potentially the future of human genetic therapy. Whatever Alexander was planning, whatever choice she made about the pregnancy, whatever. The DA's investigation revealed one thing was certain: the 3 children she carried were going to change the world. The only question was whether their parents would survive long enough to see it happen. Alexander's plan began to unfold 3 days after Dr. Reeves's revelation about the enhanced genetics. While Sophia underwent daily monitoring of her rapidly developing pregnancy, Alexander had been making calls to contacts Marcus didn't know existed, investors from overseas, technology firms interested in genetic research, and most importantly, investigative journalists who specialized in corporate corruption. "You're going to expose Marcus publicly?" Sophia asked as she watched Alexander coordinate his counterattack from his home office. "I'm going to destroy him the same way he destroyed me, by revealing truths he thought would stay buried." Alexander pulled up files on his computer screen. "Marcus has been embezzling from company pension funds for 2 years. He's also been selling inside information to competitors and falsifying safety reports on our pharmaceutical division." "How do you know all this?" "Because I've been suspicious of him since my father died. I've had private investigators tracking his activities for months." Alexander's smile was cold. "Marcus thought my illness made me weak and distracted. He never realized I was building a case against him." The first wave of Alexander's attack came Thursday morning when the New York Times published a front-page exposé on Blackwood Industries' financial irregularities under Marcus's management. The article detailed millions in missing pension funds, questionable overseas transactions, and safety violations that had been covered up to protect profits. By noon, federal investigators had frozen Marcus's personal accounts and issued warrants for financial records. By evening, the Securities and Exchange Commission had launched a formal investigation into insider trading violations. Marcus called Alexander in a rage that could be heard throughout the penthouse. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Marcus screamed through the phone. "But I still have ammunition you can't defend against. That little medical experiment of yours. I've given everything to the press. Tomorrow, the whole world will know about your genetic freak show." Alexander's expression remained calm. "Let them know, Marcus. I think people will be very interested in what we've accomplished." The next morning brought a media frenzy that exceeded even Alexander's expectations. News vans surrounded Blackwood Tower, while reporters speculated wildly about genetic experiments, unauthorized medical procedures, and the mysterious woman living in the penthouse. But Alexander was ready. At exactly 10 o'clock, he held a press conference that no one had anticipated. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alexander began, looking healthier and more confident than he had in years, "I want to tell you about a medical breakthrough that could revolutionize human health." Standing beside him, Sophia felt her heart racing as cameras focused on her obviously pregnant form. They had discussed this moment extensively, weighing the risks of exposure against the potential benefits of controlling their own narrative. 6 months ago, I was dying from Hartwell's syndrome, a degenerative condition with no known cure. Today, I'm healthier than I've been in years, thanks to pioneering research conducted by Dr. Rachel Reeves and the courage of Miss Sophia Martinez. Alexander explained the treatment in clinical terms, emphasizing the scientific breakthrough while carefully avoiding the more sensational aspects of their arrangement. He presented data showing his remarkable recovery, testimonials from medical experts and projections for how the therapy could help thousands of patients with similar conditions. Miss Martinez volunteered for an experimental treatment that has not only saved my life, but has resulted in what appears to be the first case of therapeutically enhanced human reproduction. The children she's carrying represent a new frontier in genetic medicine. The reporter's questions came fast and aggressive, but Alexander fielded them with the skill of a man who had spent months preparing for this moment. "Mr. Blackwood, are you saying Miss Martinez is pregnant with genetically modified children?" "I'm saying she's carrying children whose genetic development has been optimized through our therapeutic process. They're not modified, they're enhanced." "Is this legal?" Have there been any regulatory approvals? We've been working within experimental treatment guidelines under medical supervision. The breakthrough nature of our results has attracted the attention of the FDA, who are now interested in fast-tracking approval for broader clinical trials. Sophia stepped forward to the microphone, her voice steady despite her nerves. I want to make something clear. Nobody forced me into this treatment. I made an informed choice to help save Alexander's life. And in the process, we discovered something that could benefit countless families. These children weren't created in a laboratory. They were created through healing. The press conference shifted public opinion dramatically. Instead of a scandal about unauthorized experiments, the story became one of medical innovation and human courage. Genetic therapy stocks soared as investors realized the implications of what had been achieved. Marcus's criminal exposure, combined with the positive publicity surrounding Alexander's breakthrough, created an irreversible shift in power. By the end of the week, the Blackwood Industries board had voted unanimously to reinstate Alexander as CEO and remove Marcus from all company positions. The investigation into Marcus revealed corruption so extensive that criminal charges became inevitable. Federal prosecutors offered Alexander immunity in exchange for his cooperation, effectively ending any legal threat from the medical experimentation allegations. But the most dramatic moment came when Marcus made one final desperate attempt to regain control. He hired a team of lawyers to challenge the legitimacy of Sophia's pregnancy, claiming the children were corporate property created through company-funded research. Alexander's response was swift and decisive. He married Sophia in a private ceremony at the penthouse, legally protecting both her and the children, while making a public statement about his commitment to their family. This wasn't how I imagined proposing, Alexander told her the night before. Their wedding. But I want you to know this isn't just about protecting you legally. What is it about then? It's about the fact that somewhere in the past 6 months, you became the most important person in my life. The treatment saved my body, but you saved everything else. Sophia looked at this man who had transformed from a dying recluse into someone fighting for their future. I never expected to fall in love with my patient. I never expected my cure to become my everything. The triplets were born 7 months later in a private wing of Mount Sinai Hospital, surrounded by the best medical team money could assemble. Elena Martinez, now cancer-free thanks to her successful treatment, was among the first to hold her granddaughters. 3 healthy, beautiful babies whose genetic enhancements were already evident in their advanced development and remarkable vitality. Dr. Reeves published her research to international acclaim, winning the Nobel Prize in Medicine for her breakthrough in genetic therapy. The treatment protocol became standard care for Hartwell's syndrome and dozens of other genetic conditions. Marcus Blackwood was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for embezzlement, securities fraud, and conspiracy. His final statement to the press was a bitter prediction that genetic enhancement will destroy the human race, but by then, no one was listening. 5 years later, Alexander and Sophia sat in their renovated penthouse watching their daughters play. 3 remarkable children whose enhanced genetics had given them not just superior health and intelligence, but an unusual bond with each other that seemed almost telepathic. "Do you ever regret it?" Alexander asked, his arm around Sophia as she leaned against him on the couch where they had spent so many hours in treatment. "Regret saving your life and creating 3 amazing human beings? Never." Sophia smiled, watching their eldest daughter help her sisters build an impossibly complex tower of blocks. "Though I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I just hung up on Victoria that night. We would have missed the greatest love story ever created through medical experimentation. Is that what we're calling it now?" Among other things. Alexander kissed the top of her head. I love you, Sophia Martinez Blackwood. I love you too, my impossible patient. Outside their windows, New York City continued its endless rhythm, unaware that in a penthouse 47 floors above the street, two people who had found each other through desperation had created something beautiful from the ashes of their old lives. The cure had become so much more than either of them had ever imagined possible. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.